Well, you're probably thinking, that's a pretty cool interface, but what does any of that mean? You've got this all over your screen, and I'm really confused. Well, you're about to find out. Let's go. RS3 is a very customizable experience, and it allows quite a lot of individual variation between people's screen setups, which can sometimes make people's videos and some of the overall RS3 content a little bit hard to digest. So to help with that, I want to do a quick UI breakdown and explain what's going on with my screen setup here. As you can see, there's a ton of buttons and it's not necessarily obvious what everything does and what it means, so I want to talk a bit about that a little. I'm hoping the extra insight will make my headhunter videos a little bit easier to follow along with and just more accessible from people that might not have tried out RuneScape 3 or people that are still getting their head around all the tools that we have available to us in this game. Accessibility is a big buzzword in the community right now, so I think taking the time to do this tour is really going to set this series off in the right direction. Now let's see what all this mess means. So we're going to start probably on the furthest left. Text box, don't really need to say too much with this. The text box, it's just somewhere that I can easily read it. It's not too big, not too small, nothing crazy going on there. Above the text box, we've got our buff and debuff bars. I like to keep this on the screen as much as possible in a place where I can see it. There's a lot of important information there, and ideally if it was off in a corner over here or somewhere up here, I just wouldn't see it. So my debuff bar will be sitting around this area here, so you'll see a lot of shit kind of popping up and disappearing as time goes on. The next and probably the most important part about my screen is my main action bar here, which has all of my range abilities. The ordering of the range abilities doesn't really mean anything, it's just my personal preference around the way I play. I tend to sit my fingers on the Q, W, ER and T keys and just kind of cycle through my abilities from there, since basic's the ones we're going to be using the most. And moving down from that one, we've got our prayer bar and a couple of miscellaneous weapon switches. I've got my main deflection prayers and my soul split on my 1 through 4 keys. That's just because they line up nicely with the QWERTY setup I've got with my basics, which means I can flick between prayers quite easily during combat while I'm firing off attacks. Being able to soul split flick is a really big source of healing, and I'd really like to be able to use that wherever I can. It's also nice to have the deflection prayers just readily available to click or to switch to soul split if I am just doing something light. So that's what's going on with those. I haven't got my damage ability or damage increasing prayers bound to anything. That's because I kept fat fingering them and they kept turning off mid-fight and I just didn't notice it. I think this one here is, sorry, I can't remember the name of that one. Divert. I don't use this very often. I use it at Zamorak to basically be able to pop Immortal to survive the big bomb on the second cycle. So yeah, that one's not used too often, hence why it's on a relatively weird keybind. Obviously, we've got my Bow of the Last Guardian here, F1, just because it's easy to access. These ones here will eventually get replaced with probably Ascension crossbows when I do need to start doing Hydrix bolt switches, but I keep them there for now since I just haven't had a use of them yet. Obviously, we've got the Dark Bow here as well. That's my shield swap for the time being, but that will likely change or potentially even stay the same depending on how much I like the two-handed shield swap compared to a crossbow shield swap, so we'll see about that. And obviously mech shins, not useful at the moment, but definitely good to have. We've got all of our defensive abilities down here. I've got all the ones that I regularly use on here. Nothing too overwhelming. Obviously there's a lot of defense abilities, but I just don't shield camp enough or base tank enough to justify putting a lot of these abilities on. Some of them are just plain bad as well, like obviously Rejuvenate's never really useful since you're going to be using, well, I'm going to be using Excalibur most of the time anyway. So yeah, I tend to ignore a lot of these. These are the fundamental ones that are the lifesavers and the ones that actually apply in fights. So we've got those there. Next one's Disruption Shield, easily one of my favorite abilities in the entire game. And if you haven't unlocked it, definitely recommend paying attention to the merchant to collect your livid plants so you don't have to play that godforsaken minigame. I think otherwise it takes about 26 hours unless they've buffed the rates, so not a good time. You can just get it passively, and it's great because you don't actually use an ability. It can sit between the greater cooldown, which means you don't have to stall or anything. It's just really useful. If you're going to resonance the damage but you don't need healing, just use Disruption Shield, keep your DPM up. Such a good ability. And since I spend most of my time using magic up until the start of this challenge, I've actually just got the spellbook swap Luna here since I'm a bit of an ancient mage preferer, so there's that. We've got my Essence of Finality here. This is a no-brainer really. Can't use it yet, but it is a ability we want in an easy to access place. Metamorphosis won't really come into play for this. I'll probably change that around with something else that's a bit more comfortable. And obviously Shatter, not an ability I use too much. Only really use it in at Angel of Death with the clan and Zamorak High and Rage, since I just need to be able to blast as much DPS as possible. Next one here is just kind of miscellaneous things again. There isn't too much of an order you're probably noticing at this point. So yeah, these are just kind of my emergency keys, I find. It's most of the time I'll tick eat my food just by clicking, but I've got these ones here in case I need to be focusing on my movement and I can still eat. A good example of that's hard mode Zuck's conduit attack. These ones are really good to put together, and obviously Elder Overload just there for the same reasons, just in case something happens. A couple of magic spells here. Won't see too much of these in this challenge. Maybe Smoke Cloud, because I've got I can't remember what it's called, Engineer of the Humans over here, which helps us land that one. Useful ability. Same with the Balance by Force. I want that in a really easy place to access, just because I'm going to be using it constantly, hence why it's on. I don't even know what that key is called. Whatever the little squiggly thing is on the left of the one key, it's bound to that, so keep that in mind. And then movement abilities. Not a primary ability that I'm going to be using, but I like to keep them easy to access. For reference, I'm always going to prioritize using Dive over Surge in most instances. There's a lot more control. It is slightly higher APM, but having that extra control and being able to choose where you're going to land is really powerful, and I'll almost always use this if Surge is isn't on cooldown. Next one, Prisma Restoration. If I start doing Hellhound kills and stuff, obviously the Prism's going to be really good, so that's a no-brainer once again. That one has to sit on Ancient Magic, which I'm going to be on most of the time anyway, so nothing interesting there. Next couple is Limitless. That's obviously a no-brainer. I haven't got it bound to something. Probably, I might actually change that to the H-bind, but Limitless, just somewhere that I can click it and use it. It's a very reactive ability, I find, and I tend to want to use it when my adrenaline's not going the way I want it to. So that's that. Then Cast Familiar, that's really good for Calgarian demons and literally any familiar I bring along, so that one's going to see a lot of use. Storm Shards, once again, just kind of a niche ability and feeds the Shatter ability. Don't use these too much, only really at hard mode Zuck and Zamorak really, so yeah, won't see too many of them, but they're there. This is a bit of a bar that's a bit of a mess, and there's some points of contention in this one. You have probably noticed at this point, I will almost always do my teleports through this menu or this one, regardless of which ones I have on here. These are old abilities from when I used to do a lot of clue scrolls, and yeah, they just haven't been moved, so they live there. It's always good. And finally, the last interesting one, Magma Tempest. Won't worry about that. That's just there in case I need it, and I do occasionally. And yeah, Engineer of the Humans. I think I've only ever used this ability like 3 or 4 times ever, but it's a useful one, especially with the Smoke Cloud as well, because when you got full range armor, you're taking a massive magic attack penalty. So yeah, you need to Ingenuity and then pop that one. So that's all of my main ability bars. Definitely the chunkiest part, but figured it was good to give you everyone a rundown of what's happening, what I've got here, and why I've got them all there. Obviously, next one here, it's my armor. I keep this one on the screen at all times just so I can see what I've got equipped. When you're switching between weapons, sometimes it's easy to lose track, so it's good to be able to say, right, I've got my dual wield weapons on and not a main hand and a shield, for example. So that's what's going on here. Obviously, access to the auras is nice as well. So that's all that. This is my familiar summoning area. I haven't really got one open at the moment, but there's nothing special on this. It'll just be familiar options. Usually I sit with it down here so I can use the special attack button despite having it over here as well. So yeah, bit of dissonance between those two, but that's the usual. Over here we've got inventory. No real reason why it's laid out and spread out the way it is. It's just the way I've always had it. My stats, clan chat, friends list, just the regular things over here. These are kind of my useful but not used all the time kind of tabs, so those are up there. Everything combat related's up here. Yeah, not too much to say about this. Look, this is the only one we're really going to be looking at. Potentially some of the magic spells if we are on Lunas, but yeah, like to keep them up here in case I need to do something techie and I need to switch to an ability I very rarely use. And finally, we've got the minimap up here. Yeah, I find it really hard to play RuneScape with the minimap anywhere else. It's always been that way. It always will be that way for me. Same with the inventory. Bottom left and bottom right and top left for those two, as always. So yeah, that's probably everything I need to run you through as far as my interface goes. There's nothing too crazy here. So hopefully this will help you understand things a little bit better moving forwards in the Headhunter series. Going to be dropping an episode of that one next week and hopefully sticking to a 2-week upload schedule. Got some really good content coming up, and yeah, I hope you enjoy that. So thanks for watching this one, and once again, I'll see you in the next Headhunter episode. Bye.